It was a night destined to be etched into the annals of Hollywood lore, a glittering charity gala in the heart of New York City where the air buzzed with anticipation and the clink of champagne glasses. The venue, a grand ballroom draped in cascading chandeliers and velvet curtains, shimmered like a scene from a bygone era, a perfect stage for the collision of old-school legends and new-age stardom. This wasn't just any event. It was a crossroads where the titans of classic cinema brushed shoulders with the self-made darlings of social media, a place where every whispered word or sly glance could ignite tomorrow's headlines. And on this particular evening, the spotlight would fall not on the planned speeches or the million-dollar donations, but on an unexpected clash that would ripple far beyond the room's gilded walls. At the center of this opulent chaos stood Clint Eastwood, a towering figure at 93, his weathered face a map of a life lived boldly. He didn't need to speak to command the room. His presence alone was a silent symphony of gravitas, a testament to decades spent shaping an industry with grit, genius, and an unyielding moral compass. Dressed in a simple black suit that somehow outshone the flashier attire around him, Clint leaned against a marble pillar, his steel gray eyes scanning the crowd with the quiet intensity of a man who'd seen it all. He was a relic of a time when respect was forged through action, not demanded through a megaphone of likes and retweets, and his aura carried the weight of classics like Unforgiven and Dirty Harry, stories that didn't just entertain but challenged the soul. Nearby, lingering near a table adorned with flickering candles, was the 18-year-old Barron, tall and lanky with a mop of dark hair framing a face that seemed perpetually thoughtful. He cut an intriguing figure in the sea of glitter and glamour. Barron wasn't here to bask in the spotlight. Growing up as the youngest son of a polarizing former president had taught him the art of observation over ostentation. Yet there was a maturity in his posture, a steadiness in his hazel eyes that belied his youth. He'd spent his life under a microscope, navigating the chaos of public scrutiny with a grace that surprised even the most cynical onlookers. Tonight, he wore a tailored navy suit, understated yet sharp, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the room unfold like a chessboard awaiting its next move. But the night's true wildcard prowled the edges of the crowd, her every step a calculated performance. She was a social media influencer known only as Vixen to her legion of followers, a name that glowed in neon across millions of screens worldwide. At 25, Vixen had clawed her way to fame with a cocktail of provocative opinions, razor-sharp wit, and an unapologetic flair for drama. Her platinum blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves, catching the light as she moved, and her emerald green dress hugged her frame like a second skin, daring anyone to look away. In one manicured hand, she wielded her phone like a weapon, its camera lens glinting as she scanned the room for her next viral conquest. To Vixen, this gala wasn't a charity event. It was a hunting ground, a chance to feed her millions of followers the kind of raw, unfiltered content that kept her atop the digital food chain. The air shifted as her gaze locked onto Clint Eastwood. A smirk curled her lips, sharp and predatory, as she raised her phone and tapped the screen to start a live stream. She saw an opportunity, easy prey in the form of a Hollywood legend whose relevance in her mind had faded with the black and white films of yesteryear. To her, Clint was a fossil, a walking anachronism ripe for mockery, and she intended to serve him up to her audience on a silver platter. Little did she know that her next move wouldn't just misfire, it would ignite a firestorm that would sear her reputation to ash and remind the world why true legends endure. Vixen's voice sliced through the hum of polite conversation, loud enough to turn heads but dripping with the faux intimacy of a seasoned influencer. "Oh my God, you guys, you won't believe who's here tonight," she purred into her phone, her tone laced with mockery as she angled the camera toward Clint. "Check out this fossil standing over there. Clint Eastwood, everybody. Like, why do they even still invite people like this? Wasn't he relevant back when, what, People rode horses to the theater. Her followers flooded the live stream with laughing emojis and snarky comments. LMAO, he's older than my grandma's TV, egging her on as she zoomed in on Clint's stoic figure. Emboldened, she pressed further, her voice rising with gleeful venom. Seriously, look at him. He probably thinks TikTok is a new kind of clock. This is what's wrong with Hollywood, you guys. They're so stuck in the past, clinging to these ancient relics when we need fresh blood, not some dusty cowboy taking up space. A small crowd began to form around her, some shifting uncomfortably at the brazen display, others pulling out their own phones to capture the unfolding drama. Vixen thrived on the attention, her eyes glinting with the thrill of a performer mid-act. You know what's honestly sad? She continued, tossing her hair with a dramatic flourish. He probably still thinks he's a big deal. Like, sweetie, the world's moved on. We don't need your outdated cowboy stories or your tough guy grunts anymore. We need fresh voices, diverse perspectives, not some old white guy who peaked before Wi-Fi was a thing. Her followers ate it up, the comment section a blur of "Yes, Queen" and "Drag him" as she leaned into her tirade. Look at him. He's not even defending himself. Probably doesn't even know what's happening. This is why we need to, ahem. A calm, steady voice cut through her rant like a blade through silk, halting her mid-sentence. Head swiveled as Barron Trump stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow across Vixen's perfectly curated ring light. His expression was composed, his hands still clasped behind his back, but there was a quiet authority in his stance that made the room lean in. I think he understands perfectly, Barron said, his voice low but resonant, carrying a weight that belied his 18 years. Vixen's eyes widened for a split second, a flicker of surprise breaking her polished facade before she recovered with a wicked grin. This was better than she'd hoped. 2 targets for the price of 1. She swung her phone to capture Barron, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Well, well, if it isn't another relic crash in the party. What's this, kid? Aren't you a little young to be playing Defender of the Dinosaurs? She laughed, a sharp performative sound, expecting her audience to pile on. But something in Barron's unflinching gaze made her pause, a ripple of unease threading through her confidence. This wasn't going the way she'd scripted it in her head, and what happened next would unravel her world in ways she never saw coming. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath as Barron Trump stood there, unflinching, under the glare of Vixen's phone camera. The influencer's smirk wavered, caught off guard by the calm certainty radiating from the young man before her. She'd expected an easy sparring partner, someone she could outwit with a quip and a hair flip, but Barron's steady gaze hinted at depths she hadn't anticipated. The crowd tightened around them, a mix of sequined gowns and tailored tuxedos forming an impromptu arena, their phones raised like torches in the dim light. Clint Eastwood remained a silent sentinel nearby, his weathered hands resting casually in his pockets, his expression unreadable, save for a faint flicker in his eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, or the ghost of amusement. Vixen, sensing the shift in momentum, doubled down, tilting her head with exaggerated sweetness. Oh, please, kid, she said, her voice a syrupy drawl as she angled her phone for the perfect shot of Barron's face. What's your deal? Coming to the rescue of Grandpa over there? You think you're some kind of knight in shining armor? Newsflash, this isn't one of his old westerns. Her followers chimed in with a flood of burn, and she's ending him in the live stream comments, their digital cheers fueling her bravado. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her green eyes glinting with malicious delight. Let me guess, you're just here because of Daddy's name, right? Riding coattails while defending a has-been? Cute. Barron didn't flinch, his lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. Not mocking, but knowing, as if he'd seen this play out a dozen times before. When he spoke, his voice was measured, each word deliberate, slicing through the noise with the precision of a scalpel. You're using a phone worth hundreds of dollars, streaming on platforms worth billions, to mock a man who helped build the very industry that lets you stand here disrespecting him, he said, his tone calm, but edged with an unmistakable challenge. That's interesting. The room stilled. Vixen blinked, her smirk faltering as the weight of his words settled over her. She opened her mouth to fire back, but Barron pressed on, his voice gaining strength, a quiet fire kindling behind his composed exterior. You want to know what Clint Eastwood did? While you're out there chasing likes with your rehearsed hot takes, this man was revolutionizing storytelling. He didn't just act in movies. He reshaped how stories could be told, how they could make people feel. He gestured toward Clint, a subtle sweep of his hand that drew every eye back to the legend standing silently nearby. You think he's irrelevant? He was taking risks when risks mean something, when standing up for your art could tank your career, not just your follower count. Vixen rolled her eyes, trying to reclaim her footing. Oh, come on, she scoffed, tossing her hair again, though the gesture felt less confident this time. That was like a million years ago. Things are different now. We've evolved past all that macho cowboy nonsense. Her voice carried a hint of desperation, as if she sensed the narrative slipping from her grasp. Her phone wobbled slightly in her hand, the live stream comments slowing as her audience began to waver. Wait, is he actually making sense? But she refused to back down. He's a dinosaur, and you're just some kid playing dress-up in his shadow. Barron's eyes narrowed slightly, not with anger, but with a clarity that made the air feel heavier. You're right, he said, surprising her with his agreement. Things are different now. And do you know why? He paused, letting the question hang like a guillotine blade. Because of people like him. People who weren't afraid to push boundaries when it wasn't trendy, when it didn't come with a hashtag or a sponsorship deal. That phone you're holding? He nodded toward the device trembling in her grip. The platforms you're using to tear him down? They exist because men like Clint Eastwood proved entertainment could be more than fluff, that it could be meaningful, successful, and reach millions. He didn't just play cowboys. He showed the world that stories about morality, justice, and human struggle could matter. The crowd had swelled now, a sea of faces illuminated by the soft glow of their screens, recording every word. Vixen's live stream was exploding, views climbing into the hundreds of thousands, but the comments were shifting. This kid's dropping truth bombs, one wrote. She's getting cooked, another added. For the first time, Vixen seemed unsure, her usual quick wit failing her as Barron's words landed like stones, each one eroding the foundation of her bravado. She shifted her weight, her heels scraping the floor, and forced a laugh. Whatever, kid. You think you're so smart because you've hung around some old celebrities? I've got millions of followers who disagree. Barron's faint smile returned, a flicker of something almost pitying in his expression. I don't know everything, he said simply, but I know enough to understand something you clearly don't. And if you'll let me, I'll explain exactly what that is. His voice carried a quiet challenge, daring her to listen, to step out of her echo chamber for just a moment. The room leaned in, the tension crackling like static before a storm. Vixen bristled, pointing her phone at him like a shield. You know what? You should be ashamed of yourself, she snapped, her voice rising with a mix of defiance and panic. Someone your age should be fighting for freedom, for new values, for inclusion, not defending these outdated dinosaurs who've had their time. Something shifted in Barron's demeanor then, not anger, but a crystalline resolve that made the air feel electric. He took a single step forward, his height casting a shadow that dwarfed her ring light, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a truth too long unspoken. Freedom, he said, the word ringing out like a bell in the silence. Let me tell you about freedom. While you're preaching about inclusion from your penthouse apartment and your private jet vacations, men like Clint Eastwood were breaking barriers in Hollywood decades ago. He insisted on casting diverse actors when the studio said no, not for clout, not for likes, but because it was right. Vixen's smirk faded entirely now, her lips parting as if to argue, but Barron wasn't done. You talk about new values. Clint directed a film about a female boxer when Hollywood swore it wouldn't sell. He told stories about racial injustice when it could have ended his career. He fought for creative freedom when studios wanted safe, soulless formulas. And he did it all without once needing to post about how noble he was. Phones were everywhere now, capturing every angle of the exchange as Barron's words wove a tapestry of legacy and respect. Vixen's hand shook slightly, her phone dipping as her confidence crumbled. I, I still think, she stammered, but Barron cut her off, his tone firm yet still eerily calm. You think what? That posting filtered selfies and staged controversies makes you more progressive than someone who actually moved the needle? That your performative activism outweighs decades of real change? The room was a tomb now, the usual chatter of the gala extinguished, every ear straining to catch his next words. And Barron was about to deliver a blow that would echo across the internet and beyond, a moment that would redefine the night in Vixen's career forever. The chandelier light danced across Barron Trump's face as he stood there, his voice steady but now laced with a quiet intensity that seemed to pull the oxygen from the room. Vixen's bravado had all but evaporated, her phone trembling in her grip as the live stream comments spiraled into chaos. He's ending her career, RN. This is brutal, and I'm here for it. But she couldn't look away. The crowd pressed closer, a mosaic of wide eyes and held breaths, their phones capturing every second of the unraveling drama. Clint Eastwood remained a stoic figure in the background, his hands still tucked into his pockets, his weathered features betraying nothing beyond a faint, knowing glint in his eyes. He didn't need to speak. His presence was a silent roar, a living testament to everything Barron was about to lay bare. Let me tell you something about Clint Eastwood that your followers might not know, Barron said, his voice rising just enough to carry over the hush, each word a hammer striking an anvil. Every time you swipe right on that phone, every time you post your opinions, even the disrespectful ones, you're standing on the shoulders of giants who fought for artistic freedom. And Clint, he's one of those giants. He paused, letting the weight of that truth settle, his hazel eyes locking onto Vixen's with an intensity that made her flinch. You mock him for being outdated, but he was one of the first to trust that audiences were smarter than the industry thought. When studios insisted on simple good guy, bad guy stories, he gave us characters that made us question everything: morality, justice, redemption. When they said certain stories were too risky, too complex, he proved them wrong. And he did it all without needing a single hashtag to tell the world how brave he was. Vixen's face had drained of color, her platinum hair falling across her cheek as she tried to muster a retort. That's not, she stammered, her voice cracking under the pressure. But Barron pressed forward, relentless yet composed, his words cutting deeper with every syllable. You know what's most ironic? He continued, his tone shifting to something almost pitying, a faint amusement threading through his resolve. While you're here tearing him down for being irrelevant, you're proving just how timeless his influence is. Right now, millions of people are watching your stream on platforms that exist because of the creative freedom he helped carve out, freedom he fought for long before you were born. And here's the kicker. The whole idea of challenging the status quo, of going against the grain, that thing you think you invented, Clint Eastwood was doing it before your parents were even a thought. The only difference? He did it to make a real impact, not to rack up followers. The influencer's phone felt like a lead weight in her hands now, her manicured nails digging into the case as the live stream views soared past 1 million. The comments had turned against her. She's cooked. Kid just bodied her with facts. And the room was a sea of murmurs and gasps. The tension so thick it could have shattered glass. Vixen's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. But Barron wasn't finished. His next words would become the sound bite that echoed across every corner of the internet, a knockout blow delivered with the precision of a seasoned fighter. "You want to know the real difference between you and him?" he said, gesturing toward Clint with a nod, his voice ringing with a clarity that silenced even the faintest whispers. Clint Eastwood never needed to tear anyone down to build himself up. Every boundary he pushed, every risk he took, it was to lift the entire industry higher, not to score cheap points at someone else's expense. He made films that changed how people think, how they feel, while you make content that changes how many ads you can sell. The room erupted in a wave of gasps and muffled exclamations, a collective intake of breath as Barron's words landed like a thunderclap. Vixen stumbled back a step, her heels catching on the hem of her dress, her phone dipping as if she might drop it. Her live stream was a wildfire now, clips already splintering off to X and TikTok. The hashtag had Barron vs. Vixen trending within minutes. "When you're his age," Barron continued, his voice softening but no less piercing, "what will your legacy be? A pile of deleted posts? A few viral moments built on mocking people who actually created something? Or will you finally get it? That real influence isn't measured in likes, but in the mark you leave on the world long after the cameras stop rolling." Vixen's hands shook violently now, her phone lowering as she stared at Barron, her bravado stripped bare. For the first time, she seemed to see herself through the lens of his words, not the untouchable queen of social media, but a fleeting spark dwarfed by the enduring flame of genuine substance. The crowd was electric, phones flashing as the moment crystallized into something unforgettable. And then, and as the tension reached its zenith, all eyes turned to Clint Eastwood, the legend who'd remained silent through it all, a mountain unmoved by the storm swirling around him. Clint stepped forward, his boots scuffing softly against the marble floor, and the room fell into a reverent hush. His gruff voice, weathered by decades of iconic roles, carried that unmistakable gravelly timbre as he addressed Barron first. "Young man," he said, his tone steady and warm, a faint nod of acknowledgement in his steel-gray eyes. "You didn't have to do that." Then he turned to Vixen, his expression softening into something almost paternal, a mix of dignity and quiet disappointment that hit harder than any shouted rebuke. "Sometimes," he said, his words slow and deliberate, "the loudest statement you can make is admitting you still have something to learn." The simplicity of his response was a gut punch, a masterclass in grace that left Vixen frozen in the crowd reeling. Phones captured every angle as social media detonated. "That's a legend right there." Clint just ended her with 12 words, and the story spread like wildfire. Vixen's phone buzzed incessantly, notifications piling up, but they weren't the kind she craved. Her followers were dropping by the thousands, her sponsors firing off frantic emails to her team, while Barron's impromptu defense of legacy and respect racked up millions of shares. Clint's words, paired with Barron's takedown, had turned the night into a parable, a reminder that true influence isn't screamed from the rooftops, but earned through decades of quiet, unshakable impact. The ballroom exhaled as Clint Eastwood stepped back into the shadows, his words lingering like smoke after a gunshot. The crowd dispersed slowly, a buzz of whispered conversations and tapping screens filling the void left by the confrontation. Vixen stood rooted to the spot, her phone dangling limply at her side, its screen still glowing with a live stream she hadn't ended. The comments had turned into a tidal wave. "She's done. Respect to Clint and Barron. This is why legends last." And her once loyal followers were peeling away, their digital applause replaced by a chorus of disillusionment. Her emerald green dress, once a symbol of her untouchable confidence, now felt like a costume slipping off a fallen star. She didn't move, didn't speak, her platinum hair falling across her face as if shielding her from the reality crashing down around her. Barron Trump lingered for a moment, his tall frame silhouetted against the flickering candlelight. He cast a final glance toward Clint, a nod of mutual respect passing between them, unspoken but profound, before slipping back into the crowd with the same quiet thoughtfulness he'd carried all night. At 18, he'd just turned a charity gala into a viral reckoning, not out of ego, but out of a conviction forged by years of watching the world dissect his family. His navy suit jacket caught the light as he moved, a young man who'd stepped into a spotlight he didn't seek and emerged as its unlikely hero. The room buzzed with his name, whispers of, "Did you see that? And he's got his dad's fire, but sharper," trailing in his wake. Clint Eastwood, true to form, returned to his pillar, resuming his silent vigil over the gala. At 93, he didn't need to chase the moment. His legacy spoke for him, a towering edifice of films and choices that had shaped generations. His black suit blended into the dimness, but his presence remained a beacon, a reminder of an era when respect was a currency earned through sweat and sacrifice, not borrowed from a fleeting algorithm. The faint lines etched into his face told stories of battles fought on screen and off, stories Vixen had dismissed as relics, only to find herself humbled by their enduring power. As the night wore on, the incident metastasized across social media, clips of Barron's takedown and Clint's quiet wisdom splintering into a million shares. Hashtag Barron's Vixen trended worldwide alongside #Clint Eastwood Legacy, the internet alight with reactions from every corner. "This kid just schooled an entire generation on respect," one ex-post read, racking up thousands of likes. "Never thought I'd see an influencer get dismantled by a teenager." And Clint's response? "Pure class," another added. Traditional media pounced, headlines blaring, "Barron Trump defends Hollywood icon in viral showdown," and influencer's career implodes after mocking Clint Eastwood. Well, Vixen's sponsors, sensing the PR disaster, began distancing themselves and their logos vanishing from her profile as her follower count hemorrhaged, down 200,000 in hours, a number that kept climbing. But the story didn't end with Vixen's collapse. It evolved into something deeper, a conversation that transcended the gala's glittering walls. Other young influencers, peers who'd once cheered her provocations, began posting their own reflections. "Watching this made me rethink how we treat the OGs," one wrote, a 22-year-old with a million followers of her own. "Maybe we need to check ourselves before we drag people who built this industry." Another, a Gen Z filmmaker, shared a shaky video. "Barron's right, we're standing on shoulders we don't even see. Time to stop canceling the past and start learning from it." The shift was subtle but seismic, a crack in the facade of a culture obsessed with tearing down to build up. Hollywood veterans joined the chorus, their voices amplifying the moment's weight. A grizzled director who'd worked with Clint decades ago posted a grainy photo of them on set, captioned, "Clint gave me my first break when no one else would. Fought the studio to keep my scene in. That's who he is. Quiet strength." An actress now in her 60s shared a memory. "He insisted on casting me, a nobody, because he believed in the story. No post, no fanfare, just action." The stories piled up, a tapestry of mentorship and integrity that painted Clint not as a relic, but as a cornerstone, his impact echoing through careers and films Vixen's generation had taken for granted. Vixen herself vanished from the digital stage. Her usual barrage of daily posts, perfectly curated selfies, snarky captions, sponsored ads, stopped cold. Her podcast, slated for a new episode, went dark. Her silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the noise she'd thrived on, and whispers swirled. "She's done." Too embarrassed to show her face. But the truth was more complex. alone in her sleek Manhattan apartment, surrounded by the trappings of her influencer empire, ring lights, designer clothes, a wall of awards, she sat staring at her phone, replaying the clips. Barron's words looped in her mind. What will your legacy be? And for the first time, she felt the hollowness beneath her millions of followers. She'd built a kingdom on sand, and the tide had just come in. Days passed, the incident morphing from a viral moment into a cultural touchstone. Young actors and creators posted tributes to the veterans who'd paved their way. A quiet revolution sparked by a teenager's stand and a legend's silence. Clint Eastwood, ever the enigma, said nothing more. His absence from the fray, a lesson in itself. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. But just when the world thought the story had peaked, Vixen did something no one saw coming. A move that would shift the narrative once more and force everyone, her followers, her detractors, and herself, to confront the possibility of redemption. A week had passed since the gala, but the echoes of that night still reverberated across the digital landscape. The New York skyline glittered outside Vixen's penthouse window, a constellation of lights that once mirrored her own dazzling ascent. Now it felt like a mocking backdrop to her unraveling. Her apartment, usually a hive of activity, photo shoots, podcast recordings, the hum of her team stood eerily silent. The ring lights were dark, the designer dresses hung untouched, and her phone, once her lifeline, sat on the glass coffee table, its screen a graveyard of notifications she couldn't face. Her follower count had plummeted past 500,000. Her sponsors had fled, and her name, once synonymous with bold, unfiltered influence, now trended alongside words like canceled and humiliated. Yet amid the wreckage, something stirred in Vixen, a flicker of unease that grew into a reckoning she couldn't ignore. She'd spent days replaying the clips, Barron's piercing words, Clint's quiet dignity, each viewing peeling back another layer of the persona she'd built. She had always prided herself on brutal honesty, but what if that honesty had been a mask for something shallower? The question gnawed at her, keeping her awake as the city buzzed below. Finally, on the seventh night, she made a decision. No team, no script, no filters, just her, a camera, and a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to face. She set up her phone on a tripod, the stark light of her living room casting shadows across her face, and hit record. For the first time in years, Vixen, real name Vanessa Klein, looked raw, vulnerable, her platinum hair pulled back, her green eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. "I've spent the past week thinking about what happened," she began, her voice trembling, but resolute, a far cry from the polished venom she'd wielded at the gala. "And I need to say something, to Mr. Eastwood, to Barron Trump, and to all of you." She swallowed hard, her hands twisting in her lap as the live stream flickered to life, views ticking upward hesitantly. "I built my brand on being brutally honest, but that night, Barron showed me what real honesty looks like. It's not about tearing people down for views or likes. It's about standing up for what matters, even when it's hard." Her voice broke, and she paused, glancing off camera as if searching for courage. "Mr. Eastwood, I disrespected not just you, but everything you've done. Decades of work that made my career possible. I mocked a legacy I didn't even bother to understand. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm promising to do better." The words hung in the air, raw and unpolished, and the internet paused to listen. The comments flooded in. "Whoa, is this real?" "She's actually owning it," as Vanessa's confession struck a chord. "I thought influence was about numbers," she continued, her voice steadying as she found her footing. "But Barron was right. What's my legacy? I've spent years chasing trends, but I haven't built anything that lasts. Clint Eastwood did. He changed how stories are told, how people think, and I dismissed that because I didn't see past my own bubble." She looked directly into the camera, her gaze unflinching. "I'm sorry, and I'm going to prove it, not with words, but with what I do next." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Views soared past 1 million, and the tone shifted. This is what growth looks like. Respect earned back. Now this is influencing. Other influencers chimed in, some skeptical, others moved. "If she means it, this could be big," one wrote. Traditional media picked up the story anew. Influencer's apology goes viral after gala debacle. Vanessa ended the stream abruptly, not lingering for the applause, and sat back, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a start, a crack in the armor she'd worn too long. The ripples didn't stop there. Barron Trump, asked about the incident in a rare, brief interview outside a Manhattan coffee shop, offered a simple response that cut through the noise. "Sometimes the youngest person in the room has to remind everyone what the older generation taught us," he said, his voice calm, his hazel eyes catching the morning light. "Respect isn't outdated, it's timeless." Ashamed, the clip spread, a quiet coda to a stand at the gala, and fans dubbed it Barron's Law, a call to bridge generational divides with understanding, not disdain. Clint Eastwood, ever the man of few words, responded in his own way. A handwritten note arrived at Vanessa's apartment days later, its envelope bearing the faint scent of old leather and ink. She opened it with trembling hands, revealing a single line in his unmistakable scrawl. "The true measure of character isn't never making mistakes, it's what you learn from them." Vanessa shared it online with his permission, captioning it simply, "A lesson I won't forget." The post didn't erase her losses, but it sparked a new conversation. Clint's still teaching us all. Grace in one sentence. And her followers began trickling back, drawn by the promise of something real. The story could have ended there, a neat bow on a viral saga, but its impact stretched further, weaving itself into the fabric of online culture. Whenever someone mocked a legacy figure now, comments popped up fast. "Remember what Barron said about giants' shoulders?" Or Clint's note, though, "Learn, don't burn." Young creators began seeking out veterans for mentorship, posting collaborations that honored the past while shaping the future. Vanessa herself stepped back from the spotlight, quietly working on a documentary about Hollywood's unsung trailblazers. Her first project not driven by likes, but by a hunger to understand the industry she'd once dismissed. In an age where influence often meant destruction for attention, this became something different. A reminder that real power lies in the respect you show, the wisdom you seek, and the legacy you build. Clint Eastwood remained silent, his lesson delivered without fanfare, while Barron returned to his low-profile life, his words still echoing. Vanessa, once vixen, emerged not unscathed but changed, her journey a testament to the rare beauty of owning a fall and rising anew. And as the gala faded into memory, its lesson endured. Every generation has something to teach and something to learn, if only we're brave enough to listen.